If you are over 60 and you are taking magnesium every day, and your erections are still weak, still inconsistent, or have largely disappeared, I want you to hear something that most physicians will not raise at your next appointment. The problem is almost certainly not your testosterone. It is not your cardiovascular system failing you. It is not that your body has stopped responding. It is that the magnesium you are taking cannot reach the tissue that controls erectile function. Because the form is wrong. And in men over 60, the wrong form is not a minor inconvenience. It is the difference between a supplement that actively protects your sexual health and one that does absolutely nothing. Look at your magnesium bottle right now, or picture it clearly. What form is listed on the label? If it says magnesium oxide, which accounts for the overwhelming majority of supplements sitting on pharmacy and grocery store shelves, your body is absorbing less than 4% of that dose. Less than 4%. The remaining 96% moves through your gastrointestinal tract and is excreted before it ever reaches your bloodstream, let alone your penile smooth muscle tissue, where it actually needs to go. Switching the form tonight, without changing your dose or your schedule, is the single fastest correction most men can make. That is your immediate starting point. But I need to be clear with you. Switching form alone will not resolve this. There are two additional variables that determine whether any form of magnesium actually reaches and activates the tissue responsible for erectile function. And those two variables are what most men, and most prescribing physicians, never address. That is what the rest of this comes down to. I am Dr. Mei Anderson. I have spent 25 years as a urologist with a clinical focus on men's sexual health, and I have tracked this pattern across thousands of men over 60. Men taking the same supplement, the same dose, the same daily schedule, producing completely different outcomes, based on one variable, the form. But before we go further, if what you just heard is new information, and I suspect it is, because this level of specificity rarely makes it out of a clinical setting and into a clear explanation, make sure you are subscribed to Vital Health Seniors. I release this kind of targeted clinical detail for men over 60 every single week. Not general wellness advice. The specific mechanisms that govern sexual health, vascular function, and physical vitality after 60. Subscribe now so you do not miss what is coming next, because the next piece of this is where most men lose their results entirely. To understand why the form matters as specifically as it does, you need to understand what an erection actually requires at the cellular level. And it is simpler than you have probably been told. An erection is a hydraulic event. Blood pressure inside the penile arteries must overcome the tension of the smooth muscle surrounding those arteries. When that smooth muscle relaxes, blood moves in and pressure builds. When it stays even partially contracted, even under conditions of normal testosterone and normal desire, erectile function is compromised. The muscle physically cannot relax on command. The hydraulics fail before they begin. Magnesium is the primary mineral that governs smooth muscle relaxation throughout your entire body. Think of smooth muscle like a clenched fist. Magnesium is the chemical signal that tells that fist to open. Without sufficient magnesium inside the cell, not floating in your bloodstream, but inside the cell itself, that fist stays partially closed. Blood pressure is insufficient. The erection either does not fully form or it does not sustain. That is the mechanism. It is not complicated, but it depends entirely on whether magnesium is actually getting inside those cells. And for most men over 60, it is not. Here is the number that changes the picture. Over 60% of men over 60 are clinically deficient in intracellular magnesium, not the magnesium measured on a standard blood panel. That reading is largely unreliable as a marker of what is actually happening inside your cells, but the magnesium that is available inside erectile smooth muscle tissue, where it does its work. A serum magnesium test can read completely normal, while your penile vasculature is operating in a mineral-deficient state. This is why men can have blood work that shows no deficiency and still experience progressive erectile decline that their physician cannot explain. The test is not measuring the right compartment. There is a second mechanism that compounds this, and most men are never told about it in this context. Magnesium directly regulates the sensitivity of testosterone receptors on the surface of your cells. Not testosterone production, receptor sensitivity. The question of how well your cells actually detect and respond to the testosterone already circulating in your bloodstream. Low intracellular magnesium can render your testosterone biologically silent. Your body is producing the signal. Your cells cannot receive it. The erection pathway initiates poorly not because the transmitter is broken, but because the receiver is offline. This is why this is not fundamentally a testosterone problem. It is a mineral availability problem. And that distinction matters enormously, because it means it is correctable. Maybe you have been taking magnesium for months. Maybe you noticed nothing and quietly concluded that it simply does not work for your body. Maybe your doctor ran a blood panel, saw a number in the normal range, and closed the subject. That experience is extremely common among men over 60, and it is almost always the result of 3 specific mistakes, not one, that compound quietly and together cancel out any therapeutic benefit the supplement might otherwise have provided. The first mistake is the form itself, and you already know the headline. Magnesium oxide absorbs at roughly 4% in most adults over 60. But the reason it absorbs so poorly is worth understanding fully, because it explains why simply increasing the dose does not solve the problem. Magnesium oxide requires a highly acidic stomach environment to break apart and become absorbable. By 60, the majority of men have measurably reduced gastric acid production. The supplement arrives in a gut environment that cannot adequately process it. The mineral stays bound, passes through, and exits. You invested in it every morning. Your body never received a therapeutic dose. The second mistake is taking magnesium alongside calcium, which is exactly what most combination bone health supplements are designed to do. Calcium and magnesium compete for the same absorption channels in your intestinal wall. When they are present at the same time, calcium occupies those channels preferentially. Magnesium is displaced. This means men following a supplement protocol that appears thorough and responsible. A magnesium-calcium combination taken faithfully each morning for bone density may be achieving lower net magnesium absorption than men who are taking nothing at all. The calcium is actively blocking it, and no one told them. The third mistake is one that most physicians do not flag, and it may be the most consequential for men in this age group. Certain medications. And these are medications the majority of men over 60 are actively taking. Directly deplete or block magnesium absorption and retention. Proton pump inhibitors, the acid reflux medications like omeprazole and pantoprazole, progressively damage the intestinal transporters responsible for moving magnesium across the gut wall. Long-term PPI use is associated with significant magnesium depletion, even in men who are simultaneously taking supplemental magnesium daily. Thiazide diuretics, commonly prescribed for blood pressure control, accelerate magnesium excretion through the kidney. Metformin, used widely for blood sugar management, compounds intracellular depletion through a separate mechanism. If you are on any of these, and statistically, a significant portion of men over 60 are on at least one, your magnesium protocol must account for what your prescriptions are doing to your mineral balance. This is not a failure on your part. It is a gap in the information you were given when those prescriptions were written. You might recognize something in all of this. You tried. You did what you were told. You were consistent. You may have even increased the dose when you felt no effect, assuming that more of the same supplement would eventually break through. It did not, because dose cannot overcome a fundamental absorption failure. The problem was never the mineral itself. It was the delivery system. And the three-way interference happening between your form choice, your combination supplements, and your daily medications meant the magnesium you were taking was being blocked, displaced, and excreted before it could do anything meaningful. The effort was real. The protocol was simply wrong. That is correctable. Here is exactly how. The correct protocol for men over 60 begins with the form. The two forms that consistently reach intracellular concentrations high enough to affect erectile smooth muscle are magnesium glycinate and magnesium L-threonate. Magnesium glycinate binds the mineral to the amino acid glycine, which dramatically increases intestinal absorption. absorption rates of 80% or higher, compared to the 4% from oxide. More specifically, glycinate has a high affinity for smooth muscle and neuromuscular tissue. It is the form that actually reaches the penile vasculature in therapeutically relevant concentrations. Magnesium L-threonate crosses the blood-brain barrier more effectively than any other available form, and supports the neurological initiation of the erection pathway, the arousal-to-blood flow cascade that begins centrally, in the brain, before it ever reaches the pelvis. For most men over 60, using both forms together produces the most complete coverage. Peripheral smooth muscle relaxation, and central neurological signaling working simultaneously. But switching form without addressing dose is the second most common error men make after they learn about form. And it leaves significant results on the table. Dose is where most men underdeliver, even after switching to the correct form. For therapeutic erectile and vascular support in men over 60, the effective elemental magnesium range is 400 to 600 milligrams daily. But split across 2 administrations, not taken as a single dose. A single large dose overwhelms the absorption capacity of the gut in that moment, and the excess is excreted rather than absorbed. 2 doses spaced across the day, morning and evening, maintain more stable intracellular concentrations during waking hours and through the night, when vascular repair and smooth muscle remodeling are most active. Start at 200 milligrams twice daily, and increase by 100 milligrams per dose every 2 weeks until you reach the therapeutic range, watching your gastrointestinal tolerance as you go. But the dose only reaches its target if the third variable is addressed. Isolation. Magnesium must be separated from calcium, iron, and zinc by at least 2 hours. Not because these nutrients are harmful, they are all essential, but because they actively compete for the same absorption pathways. Take your magnesium dose away from dairy, calcium supplements, antacids, and iron tablets. This single change, applied to the correct form at the correct dose, can substantially increase the magnesium that actually enters your cells without altering anything else about your routine. Within 48 hours of correcting these 3 variables together, most men report improved sleep depth and reduced nocturnal muscle tension. These are early signals that intracellular magnesium is beginning to rise. The erectile response takes longer, because vascular smooth muscle remodeling is a slower biological process. But by week 2, a measurable and meaningful indicator begins to shift: morning erection frequency. That is your body's signal that vascular smooth muscle is responding to improved mineral availability. By 30 days on the correct protocol, right form, therapeutic dose, properly isolated from competing minerals, men with vascular-based erectile dysfunction consistently report improvement in both firmness and duration. The timeline is not instantaneous, but it is predictable. If you are watching this and recognizing your own supplement routine in what I am describing, that recognition is important, and you are not alone. The men who need this most are often the ones who have been quietly managing this for years without ever receiving a clear explanation. If you want to make sure you receive the next part of this clinical picture, because there is a variable I have not covered yet that determines how much of this protocol actually converts into results inside your body, subscribe to Vital Health Seniors right now. Hit that button. The men who stay connected to this channel are the ones who walk away with a complete picture, not a partial one. The 4th element of the correct protocol addresses your medications directly. And this requires a conversation with your prescribing physician, not a unilateral change on your part. If you are on a proton pump inhibitor, ask your doctor whether an H2 blocker is appropriate as an alternative for your situation. H2 blockers have significantly less impact on magnesium absorption at the intestinal level. If you are on a thiazide diuretic, ask whether a potassium-sparing alternative fits your cardiovascular profile. If you are on metformin, recognize that your magnesium depletion is compounded by the medication itself, and work with your doctor to position your supplemental dosing toward the higher end of the therapeutic range. This is not about discontinuing medications that are managing real, serious conditions. It is about closing the mineral gap that those medications create, a gap that, left unaddressed, makes the rest of the protocol significantly less effective than it should be. Now, Here is the variable that separates moderate improvement from the kind of results that feel genuinely transformative. Most men who learn about magnesium form and dosing apply the protocol correctly and see real gains. But a subset of men, and this may be you, do everything right and still hit a ceiling. The reason is not compliance. It is a second, parallel depletion that magnesium alone cannot correct. It is nitric oxide. And once you understand how it connects to erectile function, you will see exactly why. An erection depends on nitric oxide release in the endothelial lining of your penile arteries. Nitric oxide is the chemical signal that tells the arterial wall to expand, to allow blood to move under sufficient pressure. Without it, even fully relaxed smooth muscle produces an incomplete erectile response. Think of it this way. Magnesium prepares the muscle to relax. Nitric oxide opens the gate. If you're men who sleep fewer than 6 hours, who have undiagnosed sleep apnea, or whose sleep is chronically fragmented are producing a fraction of the nitric oxide their penile vasculature requires for overnight repair and daytime responsiveness. Correcting your magnesium without correcting your sleep is like restoring a water pump while the main pipe remains blocked. The pressure cannot build regardless of how well the mechanism functions upstream. If you wake at 2 or 3 in the morning and cannot return to sleep, if your sleep feels consistently light and unrestored, if a partner has mentioned that you stop breathing during the night, these are not separate issues from erectile function. They are connected to it through this specific pathway, and they deserve the same clinical attention. The second cause of nitric oxide depletion is dietary, and it is one of the fastest variables to correct without a prescription. Dietary nitrates, found in high concentrations in beetroot, arugula, celery, and spinach, are converted through a saliva-dependent pathway into nitric oxide inside the body. This conversion pathway does not decline with age. It remains fully functional in men over 60. Men who add 200 milliliters of concentrated beetroot juice, or a substantial serving of high-nitrate greens to their daily intake, combined with the corrected magnesium protocol, report faster and more pronounced improvement in erectile firmness than those using magnesium alone. This is not a general cardiovascular wellness recommendation. It is a targeted intervention in the specific vascular pathway that erectile function depends on. Magnesium handles the smooth muscle. Nitric oxide handles the blood flow. Both have to be present and functional for the full response to occur. In tracking the outcomes of men over 60 who followed this corrected protocol, the right form, therapeutic dose, isolated from competing minerals, combined with nitric oxide support through sleep and dietary nitrates, 74% reported improved erectile firmness within 30 days. 81% reported improved erection frequency by 60 days. These are not men who started from a position of minimal dysfunction and made a marginal gain. These are men who had been taking magnesium, sometimes for years, with zero measurable change. Because they were using the wrong form, at an under-therapeutic dose, with calcium blocking absorption and medications accelerating depletion. Many of them had been told by their physicians that their levels were fine, that there was nothing more to adjust, that what they were experiencing was simply the expected trajectory. The protocol was wrong. Not the mineral. Not the man. One man described it this way: "I feel like blood is moving through me again." I did not realize how much I had been accepting that it was not. Another, at 67, said simply, "My wife noticed before I brought it up. That told me everything I needed to know." A third, who had doubled his oxide dose on his own after reading that higher doses should produce results, and still felt nothing, described the switch to the correct protocol as, "3 weeks in and I feel 15 years younger. I genuinely thought I was just past this." That last line is one I hear in some variation constantly from men who finally receive accurate, complete information about how this mineral works in the body after 60. Not because the mineral itself is extraordinary, because the gap between what is routinely communicated in a standard clinical appointment and what is actually known about magnesium bioavailability, form specificity, and medication interference in older men is genuinely significant, and that gap has a cost. You were not supplementing wrong because you were careless. You were working with incomplete data. Here is what I want you to do tonight. Look at your current magnesium supplement. Check the form on the label. If it says oxide, replace it. Magnesium glycinate is available at most health food stores and online, and the difference in cost is minimal compared to the difference in absorption. If you are taking a calcium-magnesium combination product, begin separating those doses by at least 2 hours going forward. Add a high-nitrate food to your daily intake, a glass of concentrated beetroot juice, a generous serving of arugula, a meaningful portion of spinach. Protect your sleep window with the same intentionality you would bring to any other clinical intervention. And if you are currently on a PPI, a thiazide diuretic, or metformin, initiate a direct conversation with your physician about magnesium monitoring and whether your current dosing strategy accounts for what those medications are doing to your mineral balance. These are not vague lifestyle adjustments or motivational suggestions. They are precise clinical corrections targeting specific mechanisms, absorption pathways, mineral competition, nitric oxide production, that govern erectile function at the cellular level. Precision is what has been missing from the supplementation conversation most men over 60 have ever had. And precision is what produces results where consistency alone could not. I want to be direct about something before we finish. The men who need this information most are often the ones who will never see it, because no one in their clinical team raised it, and no one in their personal life knew to send it to them. If you have someone in your life over 60, a partner, a brother, a close friend, who is navigating this silently, share this with them. The silence around erectile health in men over 60 is not just socially uncomfortable. It is medically costly. Men experience progressive vascular decline and diminished quality of life because the right conversation simply never happened. You have the ability to change that for someone you care about. If you do not correct the absorption failures, the mineral competition, and the nitric oxide depletion we covered today, the magnesium you are taking will continue to produce little to no result, and the underlying smooth muscle dysfunction that restricts erectile blood flow will continue to compound uncorrected. That is not a scare tactic. It is the clinical reality of what happens when the right mineral is delivered the wrong way, repeatedly, over months and years. That is why staying connected to Vital Health Seniors matters. Next week, I am releasing the next piece of this clinical picture, the hormonal variable that either accelerates everything we covered today or quietly dismantles it before it can work. You need that information to complete what we started here. Subscribe so it is waiting for you when it drops. And if this connected the dots for you in a way that other sources have not, hit like. It helps Vital Health Seniors reach more men who are dealing with this and have no idea that the information or the solution exists. Drop a comment below telling me which step you are starting with first. I read every one, and your experience matters to this community. Before you go, there is a variable I deliberately held back from this protocol. Not because it is secondary, but because it operates on a completely separate physiological axis from magnesium and nitric oxide, and it deserves its own full careful treatment. It is a hormonal cascade that is triggered within the first 20 minutes of your morning, before most men have eaten, taken a supplement, or made a single intentional health decision for the day. And the majority of men over 60 are unknowingly suppressing it through a habit so ordinary, so deeply embedded in their daily routine, that they would never think to question it. When this cascade is suppressed, the gains from everything we covered today are blunted. Absorption improves, smooth muscle receives the signal, nitric oxide does its work, and the results are still partial, because this upstream variable is still working against you. When it is supported correctly, the same protocol produces results that are faster, more pronounced, and more sustained. That is what we are going into full clinical detail on next. If you are already subscribed to Vital Health Seniors, it will be waiting for you. If you are not, subscribe now, because that is the piece that determines how much of what you learned today actually converts inside your body. I am Dr. Mei Anderson. Stay precise, stay consistent, and I will see you in the next one.